The dust settled around Jake Morrison's worn boots as he stood in the empty corral, watching the stranger lead away Thunder, his last remaining horse. The sun hung low over the Texas plains, painting everything the color of old copper. Jake's weathered hands trembled slightly as he counted the coins in his palm. $23.50. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. Behind him, the sound of a child's cough echoed from the small wooden cabin that served as his home. Tommy, the orphan boy Jake had found wandering the desert roads 3 months ago, was getting worse. The fever had been burning through the child for days now, and without proper medicine and food, Jake feared the worst. The boy's story was heartbreaking. His parents had died of cholera while traveling west in a wagon train. Tommy had survived by hiding under blankets, too scared and sick to call out when the other travelers buried his family and moved on. When Jake found him, the child was barely alive, just skin and bones with eyes too old for his 7 years. Subscribe to our channel to follow this emotional journey and discover more incredible stories from the Old West that will touch your heart and restore your faith in humanity. Jake walked back to the cabin, each step heavier than the last. The ranch that had once been his pride and joy now stood mostly empty. The drought had taken his cattle, creditors had claimed his land, and now he'd sold his final horse. All he had left were the clothes on his back, the small cabin, and a sick child who depended on him. "Tommy, how are you feeling, son?" Jake asked softly as he entered the dim interior. The boy lay on a makeshift bed, his small face flushed with fever. His brown eyes, usually so bright and curious, looked dull and tired. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jake," Tommy whispered, his voice barely audible. "I know you sold Thunder because of me. I heard you talking to the man." Jake's heart clenched. He knelt beside the bed and gently brushed the boy's damp hair from his forehead. "Don't you worry about that, son. Thunder was just a horse. You're family now, and family takes care of each other." The child's eyes filled with tears. "But now you have nothing left, and I'm still sick. Maybe it would be better if—" "Stop right there," Jake said firmly but kindly. "Don't you ever think such things. Every life is precious, Tommy. Your parents would want you to fight, to live, to grow up strong and good. That's what I want to." Jake stood and walked to the small kitchen area, where he began preparing a simple soup with the last of his vegetables and the medicine he'd been able to afford with Thunder's sale. As he cooked, memories flooded back of better times when this ranch had been alive with activity, when his wife Sarah had filled the house with laughter before the fever took her 2 years ago. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories that show the true spirit of the American frontier and the power of human kindness. That evening, as Jake fed Tommy small spoonfuls of broth, a sound outside caught his attention. Horses, multiple horses. Jake frowned and moved to the window, peering out into the gathering darkness. In the moonlight, he could see riders approaching, at least a dozen of them. Fear gripped his chest. Had creditors sent men to force him off even the small piece of land? Jake reached for his rifle, then hesitated. With Tommy so sick, he couldn't risk a gunfight. The riders stopped in front of his cabin, and Jake heard familiar voices. Confused, he opened the door and stepped onto the porch. In the silvery light, he recognized faces from town, men he'd known for years, but hadn't spoken to in months. Evening. Jake called out Bill Henderson, who owned the general store in town. Beside him sat Doc Wilson on his gray mare, and behind them were cowboys Jake recognized from various ranches around the county. "What brings you men out here so late?" Jake asked, his hand still near his rifle. Doc Wilson dismounted and approached the porch. "We heard about the boy, Jake. Word travels fast in small towns. We also heard you sold Thunder today." Jake's face flushed with embarrassment. He'd always been a proud man, never one to ask for help or show weakness. "Tommy's my responsibility. I can handle it." "We know you can," said Sam Rodriguez, a vaquero from the Miller Ranch. "But sometimes a man doesn't have to handle everything alone." Bill Henderson stepped forward, holding a cloth bag that clinked with the sound of coins. "The folks in town took up a collection. There's enough here for medicine, food, and to get you back on your feet." "I can't accept charity," Jake said, his voice tight with emotion. "It's not charity," Doc Wilson said gently. "It's neighbors helping neighbors. That's how we survive out here." Young Pete Morrison, no relation despite the shared name, rode his horse closer to the porch. "Mr. Jake, you helped my family when Pa was hurt in that stampeding incident. You didn't ask for payment then, and you helped us round up cattle during the storm last spring." Added another cowboy, "Never asked for a dime." Make sure to subscribe to our channel to see how this incredible story of community and compassion unfolds, and discover more amazing tales from the Old West. Jake felt his throat tighten as more men stepped forward, each sharing a memory of how he'd helped them in their time of need. He realized that while he'd been struggling alone, thinking he had nothing left, he'd actually been rich in something far more valuable than land or cattle or horses. He'd been rich in friendship and community. "There's more," Bill Henderson said, with a slight smile. "We've been talking, and this valley needs a proper school for the children. The county's approved funding for a teacher's salary, and we think this would be the perfect location. You could teach the local kids, and Tommy would have other children to play with. When he gets better." Dr. Wilson had already moved past Jake into the cabin to examine Tommy. After a few minutes, he emerged with a reassuring smile. "The boy's fever is breaking. With proper medicine and nutrition, he'll be running around again in no time." Jake looked out at the group of men on horseback, their faces kind and determined in the moonlight. For the first time in months, he felt hope stirring in his chest. Thunder might be gone, but something far more valuable had taken its place. "I don't know what to say," Jake managed, his voice thick with gratitude. "Just say you let us help," Bill said simply. "That's what neighbors do." As the men prepared to leave, each promising to return with supplies and help in the coming days, Jake felt a small hand slip into his. Tommy stood beside him on the porch, weak but alert, wonder shining in his young eyes. "Mr. Jake," the boy whispered, "are we going to be okay?" Jake squeezed the child's hand gently and looked out at the vast Texas sky, where stars were beginning to appear like diamonds scattered across black velvet. "Yes, son, we're going to be just fine." Remember to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories from the American frontier that celebrate the triumph of human kindness over adversity. The first chapter of their new life was just beginning, and Jake Morrison had learned that sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what truly matters. In a world that could be harsh and unforgiving, the bonds between good people could create miracles that no amount of money could buy. 3 weeks had passed since that transformative night, and the small valley where Jake Morrison's property lay had become the center of a true revolution of kindness. Tommy ran through the yard of the new school, his cheeks pink with health, and his eyes sparkling with the energy Jake had thought he'd never see again. Construction of the school had begun the day after the Cowboys' visit. Men appeared every morning at dawn, bringing lumber, nails, tools, and an unwavering determination to turn this dream into reality. Jake could barely believe how quickly everything was taking shape. "Teacher Jake," called out a golden-haired girl who came running over. It was Sally Henderson, Bill's daughter, only 6 years old, but with a curiosity that would make any scholar envious. "My daddy said today you're gonna tell us about the stars." Jake smiled as he adjusted the glasses Doc Wilson had given him. Who would have thought that at 42 years old, he would discover a new passion in teaching children? "That's right, Sally. But first let's wait for the others to arrive." Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to follow this exciting continuation and discover how a community can transform lives through education and love. Soon the yard filled with children's voices. There were 12 children in total, coming from farms and the settlement within a 20-mile radius. Their parents took turns bringing them and picking them up, creating a network of cooperation that worked perfectly. Tommy had become the natural leader of the group. Despite being one of the youngest, his experience of suffering had given him premature maturity, but also a special compassion for others. Jake watched with pride as the boy helped shyer classmates integrate. "Children, today we're going to talk about something very special," Jake began, his voice carrying the natural authority of someone who had found his true purpose. "We're going to talk about how people, just like stars, can come together to create something greater than the sum of their parts." Sarah Miller, An 8-year-old girl whose father was a German farmer timidly raised her hand. "Teacher Jake, my papa said you used to be one of the best cattle ranchers in the region. Why are you teaching children now?" Jake paused, feeling the weight of the question. It was an opportunity to teach something much deeper than astronomy or arithmetic. "Sarah, sometimes life takes us down paths we didn't expect. I thought my purpose was raising cattle and running a ranch, but I discovered that my true calling was helping young minds grow and develop, just like Tommy," said a boy named Marcus, son of one of the Cowboys who had visited Jake that fateful night. "He ended up here without family, but now he has the biggest family of all of us." Tommy blushed but smiled proudly. Jake felt his heart warm seeing how the boy had flourished. The transformation was almost miraculous, from the skeletal, frightened boy he'd found in the desert to this vibrant child full of life. Remember to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next chapters of this inspiring story and discover more emotional tales from the Old West. While the children worked on their writing exercises, Jake stepped outside to check the progress on the new barn the local farmers were erecting. The idea was to create a space where families could gather for community events, celebrations, and even dances. Jake called a familiar voice. It was Martha Wilson, the doctor's wife, approaching carrying a basket of food. "I brought lunch for you and the children." Martha had become a maternal figure not just for Tommy, but for all the school children. Her natural kindness and culinary skills made her a beloved and essential presence in the community's new dynamic. "Martha, you didn't need to trouble yourself," Jake said, though he knew she wouldn't take no for an answer. "Nonsense," she replied with a warm smile. "These children are building our community's future. It's the least I can do." As they prepared lunch, Martha shared news from town. "Jake, did you know 3 new families arrived in the region just this week? They all said they heard about our school and our community. It seems our reputation is spreading." Jake reflected on this as he watched the children playing in the yard. What had started as a desperate act of love, selling thunder to care for, Tommy, had transformed into something much larger. It was like a stone thrown into a lake, creating ripples that spread far beyond what anyone could have imagined. "Teacher Jake," Tommy ran up, breathless with excitement. "Can you teach us about mathematics using the stars? I want to understand how navigators use them to find their way." Tommy's question triggered an avalanche of curiosity from the other children. Soon Jake found himself surrounded by 12 young, eager minds, each with their own questions and theories about the universe. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to follow how this incredible journey continues and see the transformative power of education and love. That afternoon, after the children had gone home, Jake sat on the porch of what he now affectionately called our school. Sam Rodriguez had stayed to help with some repairs, and now the 2 men contemplated the sunset in companionable silence. "Jake," Sam said eventually, "you realize what you've accomplished, don't you?" Jake looked at his friend with curiosity. "What do you mean? You didn't just save Tommy. You saved this entire community." Before the school, families lived isolated on their farms, interacting only when necessary. Now look around. We have a true community, with people who care about each other. Jake considered Sam's words. It was true that something special was happening. Families didn't just bring their children to school. They stayed to chat, shared resources, planned projects together. The school had become the beating heart of a reborn community. "Sam," Jake said thoughtfully, "sometimes I think Thunder knew what he was doing when he forced me to sell him. As if destiny had a bigger plan than I could see at the time." "Maybe it did," Sam replied with a smile, "and maybe the plan isn't finished yet." His words proved prophetic. The next day, Jake woke to the sound of horse hooves approaching, but this time, it wasn't a group of helpful neighbors. It was a single man, well-dressed, riding a magnificent black horse. Subscribe to our channel to discover what this mysterious visitor brings to Jake's newfound community, and continue following this incredible tale of hope and transformation. The man dismounted with the grace of someone accustomed to fine horses and approached the porch, where Jake was having his morning coffee with Tommy. There was something familiar about that face, but Jake couldn't identify what. "Mr. Morrison, the stranger said with a refined accent. "My name is Robert Thornton. I've come a very long way to meet you." Jake stood, instinctively placing a protective hand on Tommy's shoulder. "How can I help you, Mr. Thornton?" The man smiled, and that's when Jake saw it. The eyes, those same expressive brown eyes he knew so well. "Mr. Morrison," Robert Thornton said softly, "I believe you've met my nephew, Thomas Thornton. His real name is Tommy." The second chapter was coming to an end, but Jake Morrison knew his journey was just beginning, and now, with the arrival of Tommy's mysterious uncle, new adventures and challenges awaited them on the Texas horizon. The Texas morning awakened with its usual symphony of cicadas and the distant lowing of cattle, when Robert Thornton began to reveal the extraordinary story that had brought him to the small valley where Jake Morrison had built his school. Tommy clung to Jake's hand, his eyes wide with a mixture of hope and terror. "My brother Charles," Robert began, his voice heavy with deep sadness, "was a stubborn man. When he decided to take his family west, I tried to dissuade him. I offered him work at my company in Boston, a comfortable house, education for Tommy. But he had dreams of freedom and adventure." Jake carefully observed the elegant man before him. Robert Thornton wore an expensive suit that contrasted sharply with the rustic simplicity of the surroundings, but his eyes showed the same pain Jake had seen in so many pioneers who had lost everything in their pursuit of the American dream. "When I received news of his death from cholera," Robert continued, "I hired private investigators to find Tommy. It took me 3 months to locate him, and when I finally arrived in this valley, they told me that a man named Jake Morrison had saved an orphan child from the desert." Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to follow this exciting conclusion and discover more incredible stories from the Old West that will touch your heart. Tommy moved closer to Jake, clearly confused and frightened by this revelation. For months he had created a new identity as Jake's adopted son, and now his past was returning to claim him. "Mr. Thornton," Jake said carefully, "Tommy has been through very difficult experiences. He's found stability and happiness here. Before making any decisions, perhaps we should consider what's best for him." Robert nodded with understanding. "Mr. Morrison, I've traveled through 3 states to get here. Along the way, I heard extraordinary stories about you. In every town, at every inn, people talked about the man who sold his last horse to save an orphan child, and how that inspired an entire community to come together." The conversation was interrupted by the familiar sound of children approaching. It was time for classes to begin, and like every morning, the students of the small school arrived with energy and enthusiasm. Tommy visibly struggled between his loyalty to Jake and curiosity about this uncle he had never known. "Teacher Jake," asked Sally Henderson, noticing the tension in the air, "is everything all right?" Jake smiled reassuringly. "Everything's fine, Sally. This gentleman is Mr. Thornton. He's come from very far away to meet Tommy." The children curiously surrounded the elegant visitor, bombarding him with questions with typical childhood frankness. Robert found himself overwhelmed with inquiries about Boston, trains, tall buildings, and whether it was true that in big cities the streets were paved. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the conclusion of this moving story and discover how love and community can overcome any obstacle. During that morning's class, Robert sat in the back of the improvised classroom, watching with fascination as Jake guided the children through lessons in arithmetic, geography, and history. It was evident that the former rancher had found his true vocation as an educator. "Children," Jake announced, "today we're going to talk about the different ways families can be formed. Sometimes we're born into families, other times families choose us, and sometimes we choose our families." Tommy timidly raised his hand. "Teacher Jake, what happens when you have to families that love you?" It was a question loaded with personal meaning, and Jake felt the weight of the situation. "Tommy, that's a very intelligent question. Sometimes in life we have the blessing of having more love than we expected. The secret is understanding that love doesn't divide, it multiplies." During recess, Robert approached Jake while the children played in the yard. "Mr. Morrison, I've made a decision. I came here intending to take Tommy back to Boston, to give him all the advantages money can buy. But after seeing what you've created here, after watching how these children look at you with such respect and affection, I realize that some things are more valuable than money." Jake felt his breath catch. What are you saying, Mr. Thornton?" "I'm saying that Tommy has found something here that I could never give him in Boston. He's found a father who chose to love him when he had nothing to gain from it. He's found a community that values character over wealth. He's found a home." Robert pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. "However, I do have a proposition. Tommy is my brother's only child, and when I pass away, he will inherit my estate. It's substantial enough to ensure that this school, this community, will never want for anything. But I want him to grow up here, with you, learning the values that created this miracle." Remember to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories from the American frontier that celebrate the triumph of human kindness over adversity. Tommy, who had been listening from the doorway, ran to both men and threw his arms around them. "Can I really stay with Mr. Jake? Can Mr. Robert visit us sometimes? Can we all be family together?" Jake felt tears sting his eyes as he looked down at the boy who had changed everything. "Tommy, if Mr. Robert agrees, I think we can work something out. More than that," Robert said with a smile, "I've been thinking about retiring from the business world. Perhaps a change of scenery would do me good. This valley could use a good businessman to help coordinate trade and commerce, and Tommy could use an uncle who wants to be part of his life." That evening, as the sun set over the Texas plains, the three of them sat on the porch of the school. In the distance, they could see families from the community approaching for the weekly gathering. That had become tradition. Martha Wilson carried her famous apple pies, Bill Henderson brought his fiddle, and Sam Rodriguez led a group of cowboys who had become the school's volunteer maintenance crew. "You know," Robert said thoughtfully, "I spent years building a fortune in Boston, thinking that success was measured in dollars and properties. But sitting here, watching this community you've built through simple acts of kindness, I realize I've been chasing the wrong dream." Jake nodded, understanding completely. "Sometimes we have to lose everything to find what really matters. And sometimes," Tommy added with the wisdom of a child who had seen both the worst and best of humanity, "we have to almost lose each other to realize we're stronger together." As the evening progressed and the community gathered for their celebration, Jake reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with the desperate sale of Thunder, his last horse, to save a dying child. That single act of selfless love had rippled outward, transforming not just their lives, but an entire community. Subscribe to our channel to discover more heartwarming tales from the American frontier and see how ordinary people can create extraordinary change through love and community. The school that had grown from tragedy had become a beacon of hope. Children who might never have learned to read were now discovering the world through books. Families who had lived in isolation were now part of a thriving community. And a man who had thought his life was over had found his greatest purpose. "Mr. Jake," Tommy said as the festivities continued around them, "do you ever miss Thunder?" Jake considered the question seriously. "You know, Tommy, I thought selling Thunder was the hardest thing I'd ever have to do. But now I understand that Thunder wasn't really mine to keep. He was just a bridge that led us to something much more beautiful." Robert raised his coffee cup in a toast to Thunder. "Then, may we all be so lucky as to serve a purpose greater than ourselves." "To Thunder," Jake agreed, "and to the family we've found along the way." "To Thunder," Tommy added, "and to never giving up on love." As the stars appeared in the vast Texas sky, the same stars Jake now taught his students to navigate by, the three of them knew that their story was far from over, but they also knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as a family forged not by blood alone, but by choice, sacrifice, and an unshakable belief in the power of love to transform the world. The legacy of one man's desperate act of love had become a testament to the truth that in giving everything away, we often find that we receive far more than we ever dreamed possible. And in a small valley in Texas, surrounded by friends who had become family, Jake Morrison had finally found his way home. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories that prove the best things in life aren't things at all. but the love we share and the communities we build together.